Welcome to H2 Mobility at the Europe campus in Berlin. I'm very pleased to welcome you all here this morning. We have about 40 people here in the room. And of course, I welcome everyone who's following us online. Feeling happy or being delighted feels somewhat strange these days. I do it without forgetting what is happening in Ukraine at the moment. It is more topical than ever that the European countries and other countries in the world wonder how they can become more independent of fossil fuels, and hydrogen and fuel cells can play a very important role because they have a much lower demand for raw materials than other technologies, for example, batteries. And the larger the vehicles are, and you will see a number of large ones, the greater this advantage. So there is this need and this wish and our objectives at H2 Mobility to create a situation where green hydrogen works in transport and can be used in a comprehensive fashion. In recent years, we've been quite successful doing that. In Germany, we grew the infrastructure much faster and built more stations with H2 mobility than any other company in any other country in the world. But that's not sufficient to make hydrogen successful in the long term. We need more vehicles, more green hydrogen, and reliable and much more cost-efficient infrastructure. In recent months or even years, I've been working with a great team of colleagues and advisors in order to realign H2 mobility. We established clear objectives, drew up a very good plan, and formally the company entered into a new shareholder agreement, and we increased our capital to have a solid new basis. Now, our next landmark or our next objective is to build the hydrogen refueling station network. In order to be successful with that, we need three factors. We focus on them. One is a plannable demand. We will focus on regional customers, on fleet customers, and reliably utilize our stations. And where we find solutions together with customers and automotive manufacturers, we will further develop the network. Then economies of scale and scalability. Our stations will have 5 times the performance than the ones we have at the moment. And these stations will service trucks, buses, and commercial vehicles predominantly. But they will also fuel smaller commercial vehicles and passenger vehicles with 700 bars. Because of the scalability and other factors, we expect that the infrastructure cost per kilo could be reduced by 80% by 2030. And thirdly, everything we do only makes sense if we don't only look at emissions on the vehicle side, but on the entire production. And we want to have green hydrogen at an extent of 100% by the year 2030. This realignment involved many people, and particularly one person was involved, and he's here today. I'm very pleased to welcome Mr. Pierre-Étienne Franck. Pierre-Étienne Franck is the CEO of Hy24, and we will hear more about Hy24 in a minute. Pierre-Étienne, a warm welcome to you.
Excited, I have to say, to be allowed to combine the skill set of H2 Mobility with the capital provided by the largest hydrogen infrastructure fund you are managing. You manage a very large fund. Nevertheless, I bet there are many people in the audience who have probably never heard until today of Hy24. So maybe you start by explaining what Hy24 actually is.
I would be very surprised that some people don't know Hy24. So Hy24 is what we call a fund manager. It's been developed jointly by a group of executives from the industry on hydrogen, in 5T hydrogen, and Ardian, which is the largest European fund manager today. So it's a dedicated fund manager, which is now managing a fund which has been steered by large industrial players, Air Liquide, Total, Vinci, Plug Power, Baker Hughes, Chart, and a couple of others. Today, this fund that we manage is close to 1.5 billion. We have already had 2 rounds of financing, and the composition of the fund is a mix of financial and industrial players. The industrial players today represent 60% of the funding, and 40% is from financial ones. The final composition of the fund should be closer to 50-50. The fund is the first fully dedicated fund to hydrogen economy, and it's fully dedicated to funding large assets, because the original idea of that fund was that we need to move at scale, and to move at scale, industry alone cannot do. We need the support from large financial institutions, and we need to use financial engineering so as to be able to share the risk, share the load, and grow very large. The fund is going to invest on the whole value chain. And if we move into a play like yours, it's in a way that we're going to do in each time we invest. It's not alone. Always investing alongside other players like we do today, which means that when we move into a project, we come with partners. We usually come aligned with the societal goal of the project, so policymakers are supporting it. So the leverage effect of the fund makes that with 1.5 billion, we're going to mobilize close to 15 billion worth of investments. And 50% of that fund is to be dedicated to transport-related activities. It means that in the next 6 years, the fund should be ready to invest up to 900 million in transport-related topics. In Europe, in Asia, in Americas, where we have the best projects, of course. So the clock is ticking to find the right projects, and apparently you were one of those.
Best projects, right projects, first project, that sounds all very good. So we are one of those projects, and I'm very happy about it. Can you explain to us why we are one of the first projects? Why have you chosen us?
Because of you, Nicolas.
That's a good
because
reason.
Of you. No, not only, but it's part of it. So, as I said, 50% is on transport, and we believe transport remains one of the key places where hydrogen has a big contribution for climate change. We know it's basically bringing a customer experience which is unmatched compared to the existing one. It's bringing things that the electrons alone cannot capture, and the potential emission reduction due to the efficiency of hydrogen solutions compared to fuel is very significant. So the potential in transport overall is significant. There are today 5 places in the world where transport is really moving. First one is California, with a very strong policy support. Then you've got Korea, where the drive of Hyundai and the public authorities makes that today you've got more than 20,000 cars up and running there, which is today by far the largest country in terms of use. Then you've got Japan with Toyota and on the whole Japanese vision for hydrogen-based society, which is moving forward. Nobody speaks so much about China, but they are the one having the largest fleet of trucks and buses. And the 5th one, not the lowest one, is Germany. And Germany is the one where we probably have seen, thanks to the gathering of the pioneering industry leaders of the sector, plus a very comprehensive team over the last 7 years, you've built a unique network. It's the largest. It's the one that has developed a very strong knowledge of building, investing, maintaining, operating, with, I think, a relatively good customer satisfaction. We will see later, I guess, what they say. But I think you've got, thousands of customers. 80% are B2B customers, with trucks, garbage trucks, buses, and cars. So the potential, the place, Germany being basically developing the anchor of what is going to be the European long-term network development, the partners, the support we've got so far from European institutions and the Bundesregierung, with very strong support from the Transport Ministry, which I salute here, is, of course, all those elements make that for us. It's large enough, the potential is there, it's critical for the future, so it's the right time to move.
I've mentioned my 3 success factors, so demand, cost, and green hydrogen. What are your success factors? What do you think is important to make hydrogen a success in transport?
I think if you want to make as a business a success, first you need customer demand. So if you don't have customers, you can do a lot of things it doesn't serve. So customer, they usually want the customer experience and they want a price. I think the customer experience is what hydrogen brings, which is unmatched in terms of autonomy, time to charge. We all know that very well. I think we are speaking with people that know well the hydrogen economy. The cost is 2 things, is 3 things. Is first the infrastructure cost, the cost to serve. That, I think, according to your plans, is going to be reduced in euros per kilo by 80% over the next 10 years due to the sizing of the station, the scale, the progress made with the technologies, and the ability to maintain and operate far better. The hydrogen cost is up to the suppliers to do that, but we know that the target is basically to divide the cost more or less by 2 by greening also the hydrogen. So it's a challenge, but if you compare to the back to renewable space 10, 20 years ago, where the cost of renewable has been divided by 10, it's far less a challenge in a way than what renewable has achieved, so we should make it. And then OEMs. And I think OEM cost is going to move if there is a clear roadmap which is defined by both the industrial doing the infrastructure and the policymakers, showing them that they have no risk to invest. And for that, we need the last element, which is the policy support. The policy support has been very strong over the last 10 years to accompany from R&D to demonstration to lighthouse projects. We're now moving to scale. So we need to review, renew, refresh the PPP concept, public-private partnerships. And we need a European-wide regulation that makes the road to hydrogen-based refueling an unavoidable one. So the ongoing AFIR discussions need to be achieved. This is fundamental to make investors invest massively into the technology and into this plan. And then the OEM, of course, if they see that this is the road to go next to the batteries, then the TCO will decrease because the series will move. And we will see outside that the series are starting to be there, but they just need, for a clear long-term view, fully regulated to indeed move to scale.
I've briefly mentioned the situation in Eastern Europe, and which led to the war in Ukraine. According to you, is there a link between this and what we are doing here?
The link is in fact absolutely critical. We all discuss every day about the Europe energy situation, and this very tragic war is putting in the middle of the debate the energy independence and the climate change related topics, the need to move out of fossil, etc. We import basically 7,000 terawatt-hours worth of oil as Europeans. And a big part of it is for transport. The energy consumption of transport in Europe is 4,000 terawatt-hours. And it contributes around 30% of the emissions. And you know that transport is basically can be split on two types. 50% of it is light-duty transportation, is probably going to be tackled by battery and electrification. The other half, which is heavy-duty, intensive mobility, rail, ships, plane, is heavy, is difficult to serve just by electrons. You need a gas to replace a gas or a fuel. And there is no other clean gas than hydrogen, either alone or recombined. But here we're speaking rather than alone. So if you want to fully get out or less dependent on oil on a small number of countries, you need to find an alternative to oil, which is a gas-based solution. The other element that hydrogen brings, of course, is that it enables to get renewable energies in places far more abroad than Europe, and we know that Europe alone cannot deliver the renewable energy it needs for everything, for replacing its whole energy mix. So hydrogen not only enables to get the renewable from abroad back to Europe, but also to decarbonize forms of energy that you cannot decarbonize without gas. So, but in order to do so, you need, of course, to develop a hydrogen sourcing strategy. This is what REPowerEU is doing by moving from 5 million to 20 million tons of imported or locally produced hydrogen. But you need to develop the use case. If you don't develop the distribution infrastructure for transportation, in 2030 you will have a lot of hydrogen, but you don't know what to do with it. So These regulations, the development of H2 mobility, all that is basically putting forward the steps we need so that by 2030 we are capable to have a massive transportation served by hydrogen, reducing CO2 emissions for heavy transportation and paving the way for the next step. Because the long-term goal is not 20 million tons of hydrogen in Europe. It's between 60 and 80 million tons. And probably a third of it for transport. So that's critical. What we're doing is the way forward to move into independent and clean energy.
Thank you very much, Pierre-Etienne. It's good to see that we don't only share a common understanding of the facts, but I think when I see you speaking, we also share the passion for the topic. So that is clearly visible. Thank you very much.
And now, it is my pleasure to announce a very special guest who, due to scheduling problems, has not been able to attend in person here, but he has sent us a comment, and I am very pleased to announce Volker Wissing, our Minister for Transport and Infrastructure. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for the invitation to this event. The current situation demonstrates that Germany and Europe need to become more independent of gas and oil exports from Russia. We need to become jointly more independent of fossil fuels, and as quickly as possible. And one of the most important and interesting ways and means in order to exit fossil fuel economy is hydrogen. Hydrogen is the resource of the future. In particular, in order to achieve the climate objectives in transport, hydrogen is absolutely vital. You know what our aims are. By 2030, we want to actually reduce by 95% our emissions by 95% vis-à-vis 1990, and by 2050 we want to be completely neutral. This is ambitious, but it can be achieved. And hydrogen can make a significant contribution, in particular in those areas where battery electric vehicles reach a limit. Those are cases of heavy duty, for example, air traffic, maritime traffic, but also heavy duty road and rail. When it comes to private passenger cars, there is an advantage that hydrogen has, that is the very long range. And the longer the range, the more that advantage becomes visible. As a storage possibility also for e-fuels and e-mobility, hydrogen offers also a multifaceted approach, and therefore the development of hydrogen has been pursued for years. The National Innovation Program for cell fuel, hydrogen cell fuel and cell fuel technology, NIP, is the program with which to move forward. It is a comprehensive program to set up on an industrial scale the production of cell fuel and hydrogen production. And it has been used also to ramp up the production of hydrogen. And we wish to pursue and continue this success story. That's why in our coalition agreement we have set up a very ambitious update of our national hydrogen strategy, and currently we're in the process of setting up a stakeholder survey in order to flesh those points out. We have 25 billion euros in our funding that we wish to use in order to ramp up hydrogen technology in transport in Germany. In order to achieve this, we need to work on the value creation chain, and we need to set up a market for hydrogen. In order to achieve this, we are promoting the necessary transformation and changes in German automobile industry, and we're also promoting the setup of a high-performance refueling station network. The H2 Mobility initiative that is supported and funded by the Ministry for Digital Transformation and is a very good starting point. It was set up as an initiative of mineral oil companies, automotive companies, and refueling station operators. Since 2015, it has really developed in a unique way, in a kind of joint venture. It has become one of the largest worldwide operators of refueling stations for hydrogen, and is really a showcase for the excellent cooperation between private and public entities. In Germany, it already disposes of the largest hydrogen refueling station network in the world. Since 2017, the ministry has actually financed 69 refueling stations to the tune of 71 million euros. From 2022 until 2025, roughly 3.6 billion euros will be dedicated to the setup of infrastructure and refueling stations. The existing network of hydrogen refueling stations in Germany serve to service light municipal and commercial vehicles and buses. And adding to that, we wish to have heavy-duty vehicles and long-haul vehicles. So we've already set up a very interesting offer for that. But what we need to achieve now and set up immediately is an infrastructure for these kinds of vehicles. And that is why we are also promoting a refueling station network for utility vehicles. This refueling station network, which is supported by the NIP program, has a call for tender until the end of the year. We have 3.5 billion that have been set up for that, and we will further add to that. The setup of refueling stations for heavy-duty vehicles is also one of the focuses of the important project of common purpose in Europe, the IPCI program, which is a European program. We want to set up a clear signal for the industry and consumers. Together we will set up a cross-border refueling station network, and we will give it a strong impetus in order to have a climate-neutral transport for lorries and heavy-duty vehicles Europe-wide. Together with the financing, we also set up the regulatory framework. The framework is actually given by the Fit for 55 program by the European Union. It includes a whole series of measures, amongst which are strict CO2 emissions limits, and the Internal Fuel and Infrastructure Regulation, AFIR, is part of this and is set up also to obligate member states to set up their network of refueling stations. This is a good strategic basis because it offers companies planning security and it opens up spaces for investment. And therefore, I really welcome the commitment of Hy24 as a new shareholder of H2 Mobility, as one of the largest or the largest platform for investment in green and clean hydrogen. They are a very, very important player for the promotion of hydrogen mobility in Germany, in Europe, and in the world. Jointly, we will get closer to the aim of having a clean hydrogen infrastructure and economy, and we will demonstrate that it pays off. So this ramp up of this mobility and the setup, the concomitant setup of the infrastructure are a Herculean task. It requires a large share of investment and initiative on the part of the private industry, without which it would have been unthinkable. And therefore, I would like to thank all of those who are in it for the long run. You've already achieved a lot. You have actually set up the main players in the field of hydrogen, and you've set up a business case that is interesting for the industry. And thanks to good communication formats such as the Hydrogen Week, you have also sharpened the profile and made it much more visible in Germany. And as a consequence of that, the acceptance of hydrogen in Germany as a whole has been strengthened. Thank you very much for that, and please continue on that path. We look forward to our continuous cooperation with H2 Mobility and their shareholder, Hy24. Well, yes, we obviously thank the Minister for Digital Infrastructure and Transport, and I'm looking at his team present here in the hall, and you will certainly transmit that gratitude. Well, the investment in utility vehicles and infrastructure cannot just be a national task, and therefore I'm also very pleased to welcome a representative from Europe, from the European sphere, Mr. Ertug, a member of the European Parliament, who is rapporteur and speaker on topics pertaining to traffic at the European Parliament. A very warm welcome to you. Thank you very much. Good morning. A lot has been said about hydrogen, I am the rapporteur for the AFIR regulation that was just mentioned by the minister in his statement. The rapporteurs have a similar designation as those that work at the federal German parliament, but in the European Parliament, their function is a bit different. The system is as such. The European Commission sets up a draft law, and then they pass it on to the legislators. The two legislators being the Parliament, and on the other hand, the Council of Ministers. At the European Parliament, a member of Parliament is then tasked, in this case I, to look at the paper, and as a rapporteur you have far-ranging competences. You can adopt the Commission proposal as such, ad hoc, which is something that really rarely happens, or you can reduce it, take out elements, so there's a certain power involved there. And obviously there are shadow reports and shadow rapporteurs from all other parliamentary groups that you interact with, and then you try to flesh out a final draft. As someone who really promotes hydrogen, I'm delighted in trying to make it even more ambitious, and as far as the draft of the European Commission is concerned. Their proposals were not really ambitious enough. So the European Commission actually really only foresees to introduce hydrogen as of 2030, and that's much too late in the game. We have quite a number of investors, entrepreneurs, and customers here, and they want to have planning security. They want to know what the planning horizon is, and that is why 2030 is certainly too late in the day. And that is why I've pulled it forward to 2027, 3 years, and the infrastructure increase and build-up is much more ambitious now. So the European Commission actually wanted to start in 2030 by setting up the network along the core network every 40 and 50 or 50 kilometers. That would be the hydrogen infrastructure, and I've actually reduced that to 3 years earlier, and distances much shorter as well. And in the gas area, I've also reduced the distance from 150 to 100 kilometers. In addition to that, we also support hydrogen in other areas, be it in maritime transport, aviation, and all of these areas. We have made a very, very clear stance, or set up a clear stance, and I mean the European Parliament. I think yesterday or the day before yesterday, we had a first round with our shadow rapporteurs, and we have 7 parliamentary groups in the Parliament. So we have the main rapporteur with 6 other rapporteurs, and we were able to sketch out the general trend in which things are moving. So there are those who and I really don't want to just gloss over this. There are those who don't believe that hydrogen is mature enough. That's what they always say. And in my view, that is a wrong opinion. I think we can see the technology is there, but we have to roll it out. We have to provide it with the opportunity by setting up the infrastructure to also make the industry have a share in it. And I want to add one more point. Those who know me know that I'm very outspoken. In 2013, I was the shadow rapporteur for the very first law that was passed. At that point, it was AFID because it was a directive. It was not a regulation. And I have to say that at that point, from the Council of Ministers, it was already quite ambitious with clear markers and milestones in order to achieve the aims. But unfortunately, in the Council of Ministers, it was undermined. So we lost 5 to 6 years in terms of building up of infrastructure. And if we had followed that proposal of the European Commission in 2013, we would have had 77,000 in Europe. Now we have 245,000, but they are concentrated in 3 member states. So, to make a long story short, we could have been more ambitious at that time, and I don't want to repeat that mistake anymore. And that is why I've been accompanying this process since 2014. until last year when the proposal came out, and we have been pressuring the European Commission to the extent that they have once again introduced this as a regulation, not as a directive. You don't need to be a lawyer in order to know that a regulation has to be transposed into national law 1 to 1, i.e. as it is, and that is of course much more stricter than it is the case in the directive.
55-Paket das letzte.
So with the Fit for 55 package, the F-year proposal was made. It's not only about hydrogen, it's also about other technologies and the way we want to develop them. But one thing must be clear, this is only about the public sphere, not the private sector. The public sector is what we can regulate as regulators. And in the public sphere, it's always about tax money, and you can only spend each euro once. So in the European Parliament, we place a lot of importance on the fact that these measures should then become effective because of the law. So the objectives of the European Union to become the first CO2 neutral continent by 2050 is achieved, and we would like to pave the way to achieve that. And finally, it will not get us anywhere if we hesitate in order to resolve the chicken and egg problem. So in hydrogen, we have to avoid this, and the European Union has to make money available to develop infrastructure so you in the private sector know what direction the development goes into. Thank you very much for your invitation. I look forward to this excellent event also from the European angle, and I'm glad I could contribute to it. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Artuk. I think you play a decisive role on the European level, and I'm very happy to have you here today. As H2 Mobility, we have a capital increase of 110 million, and that is the prerequisite for the successful implementation of the objectives we just listed. We want a new investor, you already heard that, for the first time in an investment fund as a shareholder of a hydrogen refueling infrastructure operator. But all industrial companies that are participating in H2 Mobility and made it to what it is are also participating in the new capital increase. I think they deserve a nice photo to demonstrate that. So I kindly ask all shareholder representatives to come on stage now. Gilles Levent from Air Liquide will be the first one. After him, Manfred Tuckert from Daimler Truck AG, Ronald Gassmann from Hyundai, Matthias Kanz from Linde. It's a little bit difficult to sort all this out. The H is in the right position. Great. There's another letter missing here on the left. Michael Sattler from OMV. Andreas Jansson from Shell. And Jan Peterson from TotalEnergies. Now we need the N. Now it has become clear what this is about. Of course, the investors and shareholders are only one part. The team is also important. The team is so large that it doesn't fit on stage, but would like to ask some representatives of the team to come on stage. Nora, Anne Martin, and Sibylle, could you please join us here on stage, on the left and on the right, so we are all in the family photo. Great. So do we all fit in? Could you please remove your masks? Thank you. Thank you very much. So let's collect the letters again. And everyone can now take their places behind the tables. And I'm looking forward to what our shareholders have to say regarding the present situation and regarding our plan to become successful in the future. Well, we are living in turbulent times, to put it mildly. How is Total Energy setting up to react to the challenges of the time? Well, first of all, thank you very much, and also welcome from me. We at Total Energies have the objective by 2050 at the latest to become carbon free, together with society in the entire value chain from production to the use of energy products by our customers. So hydrogen plays a very important role for us in production and in use. So particularly in transport, this means that we will see a shift away from the passenger vehicles to trucks in the stations. We have been active in hydrogen for 20 years. We opened our first fuel station 20 years ago, and we were a founding member of H2 Mobility, and since 2015 we've been on board. We greatly welcome that now this step from passenger vehicles to trucks has been made, because we are deeply convinced that in commercial vehicles, long distance haulage, hydrogen is important to make the necessary energy available. And I would like to mention that we're very glad that we're not only part of H2 Mobility and the capital increase, but that we also have a share that increases within H2 Mobility. So this is one of the most motivated among the former shareholders. Andreas, you're rather new in the group and in your present role with hydrogen. Shell has been investing in the technology for quite some time. What does it mean from the angle of Shell to that Hy24 joins H2 Mobility? Well, thank you very much for the invitation. Yes, I'm the new kid on the block. This day or event today acknowledges what you've achieved. It's a phenomenal achievement, and we from Shell welcome Hy24 in H2 Mobility. We're very happy that you are a new shareholder. We agree with you. The area where hydrogen will play an important role will be heavy-duty trucks and long-distance haulage. We need a lot of players to achieve economies of scale and reduce costs in the long term. And together as H2 Mobility, we can drive this step in order to make attractive offers to our customers. Thank you very much, Andreas. Michael from OMV, I've known you for several years. You were one of the representatives of shareholders when I became the managing director in 2016. What do you remember? How did it all start? Well, Nicholas, I'm very happy that we've known each other for such a long time, also the H2 Mobility team, and I would like to welcome you all and greet you most warmly. But it all started before 2015, before H2 Mobility. We started in smaller projects in the beginning of the 2000s when we tried to coin our own pilot projects. A big step was this foundation of CEB to create common standards and to use the funding programs, as Mr. Wissing said, and the idea became apparent in 2012. It took us until 2015 before we really entered the market. And when I look back at what we've achieved together in the last couple of months, and thank you very much, Pierre-Etienne, this has been an important step for a joint future to really get the impetus to enter the market and realize the important role of hydrogen as we want it. Manfred Zucker from Daimler Truck AG. Heavy-duty vehicles are what everybody talks about. We see one outside. It doesn't look as fancy as a prototype, but it's much closer to serious production. Serious is an important buzzword. How far advanced are you with the trucks, and when will we start serious production? Well, thank you, Nicholas, and congratulations to the team. You achieved a lot in recent months. You all worked very hard. Just remembering all the meetings with the shareholders, with all the pros and cons, that was a huge challenge, and I'm really happy that we're all here today. Well, Daimler Truck has a very ambitious goal. By 2039, we want to deliver the last diesel truck. So until then, we've to achieve transformation. So we started a dual strategy. In addition to battery electricity activities, we have activities in hydrogen as well. Particularly in long distance transport, we want to increasingly use H2, that is hydrogen drivetrains, and that is a very ambitious challenge. In Berlin, several years after we presented the prototype, we are back with a Gen H2. But now, already, we have made considerable experience. At the event at the time, we presented an equation. And that was motivated by the idea that the whole system can only work if we multiply vehicles, infrastructure, and policies. If one factor in the equation is zero, then everything is zero, then we will not achieve the transformation. And that is why it's so important now that at this juncture, the infrastructure makes progress. We have the vehicle outside, we're extremely strong when it comes to development. We have thousands of test kilometers behind us. We have our own test drives and test areas, and also tested on public roads. Thank you very much to all our colleagues. The protocol is not available yet, but you helped us fuel our vehicles so we could generate our test kilometers. What's important in the future will be the infrastructure. That's very obvious. We have to contribute our share, but out there, the infrastructure has to be in place, has to be affordable, and it has to be green. We entered into partnerships not only with H2 Mobility, but also with others around the table to help bring this technology forward. But H2 Mobility will play a leading role, particularly in Germany, but departing from Germany, also in Europe. I would like to mention one more important aspect. We are very grateful for what Ismail Ertug said. Without policymakers, it won't work. We need conditions that are really helpful for us and force the member states to build up an infrastructure that requires investments, but only then can we be successful across Europe, and this is what we work for. So I would like to thank the Ministry of Transport again. I know nowadays not everyone is in favor of hydrogen in mobility. We also represent mobility or hydrogen initiatives in the Mobility Council. And it is very important that the ministry supports us, because not everybody is in favor of hydrogen. And what we need is CO2 toll systems. This is decisive. We have to start putting a greater burden on vehicle types that emit CO2 and relieve the burden of those who don't emit that much CO2. So vehicles, infrastructure, and CO2 policy will turn this into a successful system. Thank you very much.
Manfred?
What about the series ramp up? When do you expect that? Well, we've committed to the second half of this decade, and that we would then go into series production then. A second topic that also needs to be ramped up as a series is hydrogen refueling. I've been asked, why don't you just make 100% green hydrogen? Actually, 70% of our hydrogen is still based on natural gas, and that should change by 2030. And what does Air Liquide do in order to solve this problem? We don't have that green hydrogen yet. What does Air Liquide do in order to promote clean hydrogen and green hydrogen? Well, yes, thank you, Nicolas. If you allow me also to say one or two words of gratitude, thank you very much for the invitation. And congratulations to setting up such a great H2 mobility team, and also welcome to Pierre-Etienne from HI24. I think this is really incredible that you've been able to get this team, this network in the industry going, and over the years running. I think that is really excellent. If you allow me, I would also like to just mention that Air Liquide has been already invested in hydrogen for 6 decades almost, also in Germany, and on a global basis. We work for mobility and for the industry for emission-free mobility, and that is why for decades we've already been committed to this aim, and we've also been committed to H2 mobility for a number of years. And as such, we are also committed to a low-carbon society. That means a decarbonization of industry and mobility. And in order to achieve this, hydrogen plays a pivotal role. Well, obviously, we need to achieve green hydrogen. And what do? As Air Liquide, we have a number of, or we operate a number of installations, and we also have a pipeline of 246 kilometers roughly, and we provide hydrogen to a number of customers. In addition to that, we've set up a partnership with Siemens Energy. We've actually announced it for electrolysis and electrolysis-based hydrogen. And right now we're actually building and setting up one of the largest electrolyzers that will be connected to our network. So this is renewable hydrogen, this is green hydrogen, and we have further projects in the pipeline. The overarching aim, obviously, is to support the ramp-up with renewable hydrogen, and we look forward to working with H2 Mobility and supporting H2 Mobility in their aims too. Thank you. The second shareholder who's also dedicated or focused on hydrogen, green hydrogen, is Linde. And so what is Linde doing in the area of green hydrogen? Well, Nicholas, thank you very much for the invitation. Thank you. I'm very pleased to be able to join you here today. I'd like to really congratulate you and the team of H2 Mobility, and welcome to Pierre-Etienne in this select group of shareholders. And I think that we've all made a very important step in so doing. But getting back to your question, first of all, Linde, we are a full range provider, meaning that we cover the entire value creation chain, starting from production of clean hydrogen right up to distribution and utilization. And in that area, we actually look back at 100 years of experience, so we are well versed in many aspects that need to be considered. There are 2 main points that I see. First of all, the enhancement of infrastructure, and an event such as this serves that purpose as well, but also looking further afield to other sectors. You mentioned some, touch upon some, but rail, for example, is also important. Around mid-year, we will have the first hydrogen-powered trains that will be presented, so that we can also move forward in the envelope of hydrogen in other fields. In terms of infrastructure, it also means working with the OEMs and engage in a debate about the refueling technology, which one is appropriate and how can we further develop that. And the second aspect is the enhancement of capacity for the production of clean and green hydrogen, and we're also making great strides there. This year, we will actually set up Europe's largest PAM electrolysis installation, and that will be in Leuna, and it will become fully operational. And obviously, just as is your case, we have further projects in the pipeline, so that going forward we will have much enhanced capacities and no bottlenecks. That's a very, very important message, that there won't be any bottlenecks regarding supply of hydrogen, green hydrogen. So we have the second OEM, and that really refers to the automotive sector. You represent Hyundai, and I think that you've also moved with your family to Korea. Can you perhaps give us an inkling as to how the topic of hydrogen is dealt with in Korea? Maybe you could also say a few sentences about the ramp-up of vehicle production. Well, thank you very much. So I'd like to also thank H2 Mobility and also the welcoming the new shareholder Hy24. I'm really excited to see how this is developing. We've only joined H2 Mobility for a short while now, but this whole topic of hydrogen mobility is important in Korean society. Hydrogen, the importance of hydrogen as an energy source is very, very strongly embedded. And I can only just take up what Pierre-Etienne earlier mentioned. In Korea, in the Korean society, the debate about whether hydrogen can take up a major role or not has already been finally dealt with. So we're not facing the kind of situation that we have in Germany or Europe where there is a debate about this, a fundamental debate going on about this. In Korea, it's really about setting the stage and taking the necessary steps. And IR for us, for example, is very, very important. A concrete example, we're already building more than 10,000 fuel cell vehicles, passenger cars, buses and trucks. We started selling our buses in Europe, in Switzerland as well. And we also wish to roll that out to other countries. And therefore, it's very, very important for us to be able to draw on a high-performance infrastructure, such as envisaged by H2 Mobility in Germany or in the US and California, where we're already setting up shop as well. We're trying to really pursue every area where we can roll out these vehicles. And the second point is we were trying to enhance the performance of the fuel cell, reduce its size, and also make it more affordable. Affordable meaning that we also need scaling effects. I think this is just as the case with Daimler. What we're trying to do is actually to use these fuel cells also as in a modular system so that we can use it also for trains and other vehicles. And also when it comes to energy supply, there's a huge possibility. And if we can then establish the fuel cell as a drivetrain, as a propulsion system that is on a par in cost terms with battery electric propulsions, then I think we have a chance to move forward. Thank you very much. Just an anecdote, because everybody's been talking about hard work. On the 3rd of October 2020, that was the starting point. That was the first shareholder meeting on Friday. And ever since then, the shareholders have actually met every fourth Friday per month, mostly at 8 o'clock in the morning, in order to pursue the topic. So at the beginning, we had twice a month, but then it also came down to once a week. But obviously, there was a lot of bilateral talk going on in addition to these shareholder meetings. So thank you very, very much. And now I would like to ask you to now move from the stage and allow for the guests of our customers to take center stage. But thank you very much, first of all, for having participated in this debate. At the end of this event, there's another highlight in store for all of us. In order to make it even more palpable for all of us, we've actually invited 3 representatives of our customers. And I'd like to invite them on stage. Mr. Wühlers from the BSR, Public Utility Berlin, then Mr. Monke, who has already included a number of vehicles in his fleet. Maybe you could just introduce yourself and tell us about novelties at BSR, and then perhaps also give us a feedback as to how the operation of the trucks is working and the refueling has taken place. Yes, at BSR, I am in charge of the fleet. We have 1,800 vehicles in that fleet. And when it comes to the process, it's really from the specifications right up to the rollout. And that also includes the tanking and refueling of vehicles. We have 11 stations and 2 maintenance. So we focus on refuse collection. Therefore, our trucks are constantly on the road. And in so doing, I think we fulfill a very important task in keeping the city clean and the living standard high. And what about the infrastructure for hydrogen? Well, first of all, I'm very, very pleased to say that we have this new technology in operation. This process is a highly dynamic process. So we started with battery electric vehicles, and now we've actually moved into a different spectrum with our vehicles, where battery electric vehicles, we actually start losing payload. If we have a refuse collection vehicle, then it's not just about driving, but it's also about compressing refuse, and there's a higher level of energy consumption involved in the operation of these vehicles. And that is why battery electric technology really comes up and hits up against the ceiling, and that is why we need a different technology. And we need to have the fuel cell as a support. And we receive this opportunity now. We have one vehicle actually here on display. We have 6 such vehicles in operation. 8 further vehicles will be delivered. And we're actually moving into a new dimension with the help of these vehicles. And I think it's very important to underscore this. In our role as the largest municipal waste collection utility in Germany, we have a very large fleet, and we have maintenance engineers, and there's a huge responsibility also to flank this transition into a more climate-friendly operation. Why? Because we have the power, the critical mass, and together with our partners, with the funds, with you, we are actually putting into practice these solutions and showing and demonstrating that they work. It's very important for us that we as BSR demonstrate this in order to overcome hurdles that maybe smaller companies might have, and in order to demonstrate that with functioning vehicles and a functioning infrastructure, and in setting that up, that this can also encourage others to embrace a different kind of mobility. And that courage should not only extend to the large players, but, and it's great to see the industry's commitment, but it's also important to roll it out and show that it works.
Wie funktioniert es?
Well, if you ask how it's working, now it's always harder in the beginning, but we have joined forces, we focus on the infrastructure issues. I always say the infrastructure is something you have to already envisage when you start developing the vehicles. These are more long-term processes, the processes you have, for example, but also internal processes in the company. We have 300 charging stations, electrical charging points, and in the refueling infrastructure, we work with partners and the public network. And this requires a lot of effort, and we should focus on that first. And once we have the working infrastructure, then we can jointly start working with the vehicle manufacturer and the converters that look for a systematic approach to solution. And we are always communicating with them, and I'm very confident that we will put them on the road safely and in a solid fashion. In a few weeks, around the corner, basically, a few kilometers away from here, the highest performance installation will be opened, and this is ready for the future strategy. Mr. Bülow already mentioned it. There are more than 1,000 vehicles in the waste disposal department, and they are very interested in the trucks that are already on the road. And this is our target fleet, a principle that we develop together with our regional fleet customers in order to develop the infrastructure and the refueling infrastructure. Yes, that's very important. You always have to take the perspective of the users, and that is the garbage collector. He doesn't want to do detours. He doesn't want to work longer hours. They need some time to be convinced that now they have a low noise and climate friendly vehicle. So fueling stations are extremely important. Soon in April, the installation will be opened, and you notice how difficult it is. There were some trees that had to be cut, and that delayed the process for half a year. And I look forward to opening the Tempelhofer Weg installation soon, because that's also important for the 8 additional trucks that are to be delivered. I recently talked to one of your drivers, and when I asked them how it's working, they said it feels faster than a diesel truck. Statistically, this is not correct, but it's nice that it feels that way, and this is one of the strengths of hydrogen. Mr. Strehl, your trucks are not on the road yet, but you ordered them already. Could you please briefly introduce yourself and tell us what motivated you to order these trucks and what trucks you ordered? Well, the other 1,200 trucks are on the road. I'm Matthias Stehl. I'm the managing director of Ulrich AG from Friedrichsdorf in the state of Hesse. We are a family-owned company. We have 1,200 trucks on the road in Germany. Our core business is the temperature-guided transport logistics for the food industry. And you can imagine that we are in the inner cities every day, and we put a burden on the climate of inner cities, and we want to do something about it. From 100% diesel, we want to develop further. We want to work together with OEMs and other suppliers. And we found out relatively quickly that a couple of years ago, not much was done. So we took the initiative and said, okay, let's join forces. Like you with H2 Mobility, we also established an association, and we joined forces with OEMs and the industry. We are still technology open, so from the electrical trucks to hybrid and gas driven trucks, CNG, LNG, and we recently bought 3 Hyundai trucks. So in the fall, they will be on the road, and then they will be used for our customers 6 or 7 days a week in 2 shifts. And the advantage is that the waiting time should be accelerated. The advantage of hydrogen is that it's always available and the truck is always available. Well, availability is also important for you, Mr. Munke. Just tell us briefly what you do. You don't have trucks, but you have passenger vehicles. So what motivated you? Could you briefly introduce yourself? Yes, thank you. Intensive mobility, that was already mentioned. We're not working with large vehicles, but with smaller vehicles. My company is the Safe Driver Group, and we've traditionally been working for the last 45 years in the limousine service and in event service. And for some years, we also worked in KIP. The core of my company, however, is that we are working for Uber in Germany. We in Berlin have 4,000 vehicles alone in the city of Berlin, and these are passenger vehicles. Passenger vehicles are subjected to conditions that are comparable to other vehicle classes. We drive between 60 to 80,000 kilometers with them per year, and we have dual shifts. That is the classic charging overnight that you need for electrical vehicles is not available. We drive the vehicles 8 hours and 8 hours or 8 hours and 9 hours, and that requires different solutions. In my own company, we already have 40 Mirais from Toyota with great success, I can say, and with a great acceptance by our drivers. The important issue, and we're actually working under the same conditions here, like our garbage truck drivers, our drivers have their certain preferences for petrol or diesel, long charging is not desirable, and refueling, fast refueling is an important factor. And for us, it's important to play a pioneering role. In 2018, I decided that by the end of 2022, all our vehicles will be carbon-free vehicles. We are on a good course to achieve that. But for the many colleagues we work together, for example, in the taxi business that still depend on diesel, we also have to offer services. Nicholas, you will ask about the problems. Well, the problem is charging and refueling. We have roughly 100 stations in Germany, but there are cities where we would like to use hydrogen vehicles. For example, large cities like Cologne and Düsseldorf, they only have 2 refueling stations, and that is not enough for our working conditions. So I share the view of our BSR colleague. Infrastructure and availability is a first, and then everything works. Vehicles and powertrains are great, and since 1977 I've been using diesel vehicles, and now I'm really convinced of the new alternatives. Well, thank you very much. Thank you to everyone who followed us. Thank you to the people in the room. The last highlight for today, or 2 highlights. One is the snack outside, but what's also important is the sun is shining, because now we can all go outside, and unfortunately people online can only see the pictures, but we will be able to see the Gen H2 truck from Daimler, the Toyota Mirai that were just mentioned, the Nexus, and for me, for the first time, we will see the Stellantis Opel van with hydrogen and fuel cell, and we also have a waste collector from Faun, the non-smoker. So thank you very much for following us. If you want to continue to participate, we have our website, H2 MOBILITY DE. You can also look at the European projects, and future customers and present customers can look at H2 Life. Stay with us. Thank you very much. See you soon. Bye-bye from Berlin.
Danke nochmal. Danke.